The sound that poured out of the tavern when I pulled open the door was like cheering spectators at a game. I mused, and I bet I know the name of the game that's being played. The noise level noticeably decreased as I entered, but I chose to ignore the attention I had drawn and looked around the room until I saw Marge, standing at the table she had taken over, waving at me. The noise level gradually returned to normal as I moved to sit with her. As I walked up to her, she got up. She ignored my awkward attempt to shake her hand and gave me a warm, welcoming hug, the way women do. I wasn't sure how to greet her. The other secretaries in the executive suite had pretty much given me the cold shoulder, so that small gesture warmed my heart. Marge was the president's secretary, so she was pretty much the queen bee among the ladies, so it was quite an honor when she asked me out to drinks. She said, "I'm glad you could come, Jessica," as we took our seats. "I wanted to get to know you a little better." "I really appreciate the invitation, Marge," I responded, "and my friends call me Jess." It was then that a cheery waitress showed up to take our orders. When I asked for a wine spritzer, Marge raised her eyebrows a little but said nothing. She had asked for a beer. As the night went on and the lights in the tavern went out, Marge leaned in and her voice became a low, private murmur. "You know, Jess, it's not just the office politics you need to watch out for," she remarked, casting a quick glance around to make sure nobody could hear her. "Scott, the director of sales, is rumored to be more than just a charmer. There are rumors that he's been in the executive suite a little too close to a few people, if you get what I mean. You have to walk carefully around him." Her gaze followed my response closely, flickering between curiosity and concern. "Marge, thank you so much for the invitation," I said to her. "It means a lot that you would reach out to me because it hasn't been easy to settle here. It seems that not all of the other women really like me." She patted my hand as she reached over. "It's not that they don't like you, Jess, it's just that you're the newcomer and Mary, the woman you replaced, had been with us for years before she retired." "I guess I can understand that," I replied. Marge continued, "And to be honest, there's also your appearance. You're so gorgeous, I suppose some of the others are a little afraid of you." "Please don't use that word, Marge." I cut you off. I quickly said, "I'm not trying to be falsely modest," as she raised her eyebrows once more. "But I'm not truly beautiful. I was never able to get a position as a top model." She gave me a dubious look. She remarked, "I'm not so sure about that. But no matter what, most of us would kill to have your looks, and that inevitably generates a little envy." I gave a headshake. If they realized how my appearance has impacted my life, they wouldn't be as jealous. Beauty is often a burden rather than a benefit. I could tell now that she didn't trust me. Each of those girls spends a small fortune on makeup, hairstylists, and clothing in an attempt to look as natural as possible. The ones who are cursed are us. Once more, I shook my head, though you would be mistaken in your assumption. For instance, like one of the untouchables in India, I live my life with my eyes fixed on the ground. I'm afraid to look up because I think that if I do, a man will probably hit on me. Therefore, I never look up. Is it such a bad thing? Marge laughed and asked. "Yes," I replied strongly, "when it happens almost constantly and when the men who approach me are so creepy or obnoxious." "Oh, come on," Marge responded, "surely some of them are nice guys." I told her you'd be surprised. In my experience, the nice guys don't even try because they think I'm out of their league or are either too polite. The majority of the actors are creeps and horn dogs. It's unbelievable that a woman with your appearance doesn't receive approaches from attractive men. How do they fare? They're as bad, if not worse, in some respects, Marge. The ones I've met believe that just being seen with them is a gift from God to women, and for that, I should be thankful. Even worse, they'll pass you by for the next attractive person who walks along. Just then, our waiter came back to see me and placed another wine spritzer in front of me. "That wasn't something I ordered," I said, perplexed. "I am aware," the server remarked. "That guy asked me to bring it over," she said, indicating that she was pointing back over my shoulder. I should have known better, but when I looked that way, I saw a burly businessman staring down at me. He picked up an empty chair from one of the nearby tables and, with a quick nod to Marge, took a seat in front of me. "Hey, my name is Al," he responded. "You look like you could use some company." I let out a sigh. "I apologize, Al," I said in a courteous manner, "but I have guests already. I just want to unwind and have a private conversation with my girlfriend." He did not even look at Marge with his florid face. "That sounds like a lot of work. Let's go somewhere where we can find a little more action after having a few drinks together." "No," I said with conviction, "I'm not interested." He grabbed my hand with his sweaty palm and said, "Come on, baby, you could have a lot more fun with me than with her." With "I told you so" look, I glanced at Marge and then returned my attention to the creep. "How long ago did you move to this country?" I asked him inanely. He gave me a perplexed look. "Huh, how come? I was born in America, I have never lived here." I mockingly expressed disbelief, "And yet you never learned the meaning of the word no." The guy's face grew redder as Marge burst into laughter. He got to his feet so fast that he overturned the chair. He quickly picked it up, turned, and stalked out. We could hear him murmur, "Damn dyke," as he walked away. I looked back over at Marge. "Now do you believe me?" She remarked, "Wow, that was pretty ugly," while continuing to giggle at the guy's quick retreat. "And that was with zero encouragement on my part," I continued. You can only picture the consequences if I had sent out any encouraging signals. It's not only about maintaining eye contact, I also need to watch what I wear. I have to wear carefully to avoid accidentally bearing too much skin if I don't want that kind of attention. Marge opened her mouth to reply, but I was in the zone and kept going. Another thing is that I always have to watch how much I drink because I saw your reaction when I ordered the wine spritzer. I have to constantly be alert to make sure I don't draw unwanted attention, so I can't afford to let my guard down in social situations. As I previously mentioned, appearing the way I do is similar to being on probation. One small indiscretion, and I'm in hot water again. Marge suddenly had an idea, and her eyes grew wide. Wait a minute, do you get hit on at the office too? I smiled wryly at her. A lot, I replied. She asked nervously, not Tom Moffat, with a shocked expression. Oh, no, I hurriedly said. My boss is genuinely adorable. He doesn't treat me like an employee, more like a granddaughter. He and I have never had any issues. Her eyes narrowed after appearing momentarily relieved. What about the silver-bearded wonder? I chuckled. My boss, the VP of Sales and Marketing, was directly responsible for two people. The director of sales, Scott Benson, was a late 30s, divorced man with an early-onset gray mustache and goatee. In the office, he was hailed as a real ladies' man in addition to being a genius. Marge grinned. I continued, and every day after that, to which she erupted in laughter. Inquiringly, what about Peter? She posed. Mr. Moffat's other direct report was the director of marketing, Peter Hamill. He hasn't come on to me directly, I said, but he looks me over when he thinks I'm not aware of it. She gave a nod. Well, he'd better not, he's married. Any others? She then inquired. I gave a head nod. Except for my boss, pretty much all of them. She gave another chuckle at that. She continued after that. So is there a man in your life right now? Telling her, no, I'm pretty much out of the dating game. That's quite difficult to accept, Marge questioned with skepticism. Her eyes then became a little narrower. Has there ever been a serious man in your life? I was aware of how tightly my fists were clenched because of the pain in my palms. There was one, but the tale is quite distressing. Shall we just put that off until later? With a sympathetic nod, Marge and I moved on to less delicate topics. I felt like I had made a friend by the time we left the tavern and I started to head home. Since I didn't have many, I hoped so. I was relieved Marge hadn't questioned me about the women in the office as I was driving. A few of them had also made advances toward me. Men are difficult to manage, but at least they are predictable. The women are worse. After acting amiable, they will slit your throat behind your back out of envy or jealousy. They can be really prickly at times, and I've been emotionally rubbed more than once. Peter Hamill approached my desk the following week as I was finishing up some correspondence that Mr. Moffat had left for me. He asked if he could interrupt me for a few minutes after waiting for me to finish typing a sentence. I have a really big favor to ask, he replied. I immediately became alert, wondering if this was Peter's cue to move. However, he surprised me by sitting down next to my desk and starting a conversation. Do you know Karen, Scott's secretary? He inquired. I've met her, he responded, but I can't say I know her well. She appeared youthful and attractive in a girl-next-door kind of way, and from what I could gather, she was reasonably intelligent. Why do you ask? Well, Scott's really down on her because she was a little late with a report he wanted, and I'm afraid he's going to let her go. That would not come as a surprise to me. Scott's department had probably had more turnover than any other in the company in the short time I'd been here. He was a perfectionist who seemed to enjoy pointing out his people's shortcomings, usually in public, when they fell short of his unattainable standards. He had let go of numerous employees, and numerous others had left or transferred. However, senior management appeared to ignore his deficiency in people management abilities, most likely as a result of his sales performance, I surmised. Peter continued, I'm hoping you can do something to help her keep her job. I suddenly felt as though I understood what was going on when a light bulb went out in my head. Are you sleeping with her? I insisted. Shocked, he retreated. What? Naturally, the answer is no. She and I are both married. I gave him a chilly glance. Many guys still play around after getting married. But why would you want to assist Scott's secretary if you're not having sex with her? Despite his caution, Peter continued on his quest. I guess I feel responsible for her. He hurried to respond, no, not in that way, upon seeing my expression. It was me who employed her. She was intelligent and full of energy, and I still believe she has a lot of potential. Nevertheless, I suggested her for Scott's secretary position when he was promoted to sales director. She received a nice promotion, and I anticipated that she would succeed. I suppose I didn't take into account Scott's interpersonal style. In the end, I want to save her if I can because I feel bad about putting her in danger. I paid close attention to him as he related his tale. Although he didn't appear to be concealing anything else, some men can be extremely cunning, particularly when it comes to bonding. So what exactly do you want me to do? I inquired. He gave me a serious look. While Scott is out of town this week, I was hoping she could help you with some work. Then, it would be difficult for Scott to fire her for incompetence if you could write him a memo complimenting her and sending a copy to Mr. Moffat. As far as I knew Scott, Peter's plan would most likely succeed. Scott was the kind of guy who was always looking for ways to get under the noses of his superiors. I looked back at Peter. I made the decision to take a temporary action because I was still unsure of his true intention. You tell Karen that we should have lunch together today, Peter. I'll tell you what. I'll see if I think I can help her after I speak with her. He got to his feet. Okay, Jess, thanks, he replied. I'll go talk to her right away. He turned to leave, then pivoted around. I really hope you can help her. She's a good kid and deserves better. After 15 minutes, I received a call from Karen, and we decided to grab lunch together. Since neither Scott nor Mr. Moffat were in the office, I knew that wouldn't be an issue, and I hoped she would feel more at ease talking about things unrelated to work. Upon arriving at the restaurant, I initially believed I might have made a mistake. After attempting to strike up a conversation with me for what seemed like an eternity, the waiter eventually brought our order and departed, allowing Karen and me to continue our conversation. I gave her a stern look. Karen, I need you to be honest with me. Are you two in a relationship with Peter? She let out a startled gasp. Oh no, what led you to believe that? I didn't answer her query. Has he made a move on you, then? Think he's attempting to initiate a romantic relationship with you? She was furious now. Definitely not. He doesn't seem like that to me, and even if he did, Peter is aware of my happy marriage. He even got to know my hubby. I didn't think Karen was trying to hide anything from me based on what I saw and heard her say. However, okay, she responded, but I still can't understand why he'd go to so much trouble to try to protect you. She gave a shoulder shrug. As most bosses wouldn't, neither am I really sure. Peter is just a nice guy, I suppose. Either way, I truly appreciate it. To me, her response didn't sound prepared. Perhaps Peter's request was as simple as it seemed. Either way, I didn't want a bully like Scott Benson to take advantage of the woman seated across from me. I said, okay, Karen, here's what we're going to do, and as I laid out the strategy, her eyes lit up with appreciation. 1 week later, as I was hanging up the phone, I noticed Peter standing there. He'd been staring at me, I could tell, because when I looked up, he quickly averted his gaze. What can I do for you, Peter? I inquired. I just wanted to stop by and thank you for helping Karen, he replied. While discussing Expo with Scott in his office, I noticed your memo resting on his desk. Thank you so much for providing her with a brief executive cover. I gave him a smile. I'm happy I could assist. It would be unfortunate for the business to lose Karen because she seems like she has a lot of potential. He nodded and turned to go, but I quickly interrupted because I felt bad about having previously doubted him. For what it's worth, I'm impressed that you went to so much trouble for someone who doesn't even work for you. He gave a real flush. Well, it was no more than anyone else would have done. I nodded, but people generally don't go above and beyond to help others unless they anticipate receiving something in return. Finding out there were exceptions was pleasant. I told him I'm still impressed. He turned back after beginning to walk away once more. I was just going to head down to the cafeteria to get some lunch. Listen. Do you want to go with me? I would normally have declined such an invitation, but Peter seemed like a really nice guy, and I reasoned that it couldn't hurt to have another friend. Sure, that would be great. I discovered a lot of new information about Peter Hamill during lunch. He was loyal to his wife Callie, which was the first. She's an interior designer, and a damn good one, he said to me. He took out his cell phone and began to show me images of her and some of the rooms she had designed. He told me with pride, she's even worked for some of our executives. Before he could continue, however, one of his people interrupted us, asking Peter to make a decision regarding some collateral material for Expo. As Peter was attending to that matter, a different team member raised yet another work-related query. Before long, our table was the site of a team meeting. Peter pivoted and feigned regret, but I dismissed him with a wave and gestured for him to continue. After that, I sat in silence and observed him interact with his people. He would listen carefully when they asked for his opinion before responding with questions of his own, which frequently led to him getting the answers. Seeing how at ease his people were around him also seemed instructive to me. They were obviously neither intimidated nor obedient, but they did bow to his authority. Upon eventually slipping away, my image of Peter was considerably more distinct. Extremely fascinating, I thought. It's nice to see someone in authority who doesn't act like a jerk. Marge asked me to go back to the tavern with her that afternoon when she dropped by my workstation. When I received a second invitation, I was delighted to accept it. She leaned on the table and gave me a close look after receiving her beer and my wine spritzer. I caught you and Peter having lunch today. I should be aware of anything going on between the two of you. Not at all, I hurriedly replied. It seemed fitting that after he dropped by shortly before lunch for some business, we would make our way to the cafeteria together. I was happy because it allowed me to learn a little bit more about him. Marge gave me a cunning glance. So what did you learn? Well, it appears that he is a really kind man. Additionally, it appears that he is a capable leader who enjoys the respect of his team members. I continued when I noticed Marge looking expectant. And I learned that he's a happily married man who loves and admires his wife. I replied with determination. Marge, I told you that I'm not looking for a male companion at this time. I'm not a home wrecker, even if I were, I firmly uttered. Her gaze narrowed as she studied me, her expression softening. You were severely injured by someone, didn't you? Would you like to discuss it? I was about to refute it when, out of nowhere, I felt like something gave way and, much to my surprise, the entire unpleasant tale began to spill out of me. In my senior year of college, I met Mr. Wright. In actuality, I suppose he found me, but regardless, I instantly knew he was the one. We began our lives together and were married shortly after graduation, exactly as the American dream is meant to unfold. He loved to take me out to places where he could show me off because he was very proud of the way I looked. I was a little uneasy about it at first, but when we got home, he was so, enthusiastic that I was glad I had done it. I was willing to comply with him even when he started asking me to wear more skimpy attire. I stopped to take a sip of my drink because my throat was getting dry. I had not been very active physically before I met him. I suppose I didn't want to become well known. Anyway, our physical lives were great after we got married, at least mine was. However, my beloved spouse was not content. A few years later, he presented the concept of role-playing. I was initially offended because I took that to mean he wasn't happy with me. However, I soon discovered that when we were in bed together, his true goal was to make me fantasize about other men. He persisted in pushing me to pretend he was Brad Pitt even after I tried to explain that I couldn't separate love and bonding. "Oh, good choice." Marge said something. "He's a real hunk." She stopped talking when I gave her a frustrated look. For a short while, that was sufficient for him, but eventually movie stars weren't enough. He then wanted me to discuss other men we knew and my past boyfriends. Even though I felt really awkward having fantasies about real people, I gave in to his persistence. Then he entered a new phase of our relationship, taking me out to bars and nightclubs and pushing me to talk to other men. He would want me to allow them to buy me drinks and join me in dancing. He would then ask me which ones I found attractive and whether I would have gone out with them if I hadn't been single. It felt as though I had turned on his on switch when I eventually acknowledged that a few of them were quite attractive. He got very excited, and I relished the extra attention I got from him in bed for a while. I was hurt and perplexed, though, when he asked if I'd consider going out with someone in person. I told him that forsaking all others was what I truly meant, and that he was the only man I wanted. For a while, he backed off, but then he resumed his provocative questions and sly remarks. At last, he said that I would genuinely sleep with another man if I genuinely loved him. Why would he do that? Marge questioned, perplexedly shaking her head. Was he looking for an excuse to see other women? I told her I was wondering the same thing, but he said he wasn't interested in anyone else. He expressed his desire to witness me in action, to observe my actions and my behavior when I was overcome with emotion. He would not stop telling me how much he wanted to see me happy and how much I would love the experience of sleeping with other men. I told him that forgetting all of this nonsense was the only thing that would make me happy. But he didn't, did he? Marge inquired. No, he didn't, I responded. One Friday, when I got home from work, I noticed an odd car parked in front of our house. My husband was talking to two very big men when I went inside. I was dumbfounded when he presented them to me. He blurted out, "These guys are the biggest guys I've ever seen. They'll deceive you throughout the entire evening and provide an exhilaration unlike anything you've ever experienced. You'll adore it, I promise." I took a moment to wipe away the tears streaming down my cheeks. Marge, it was unbelievable. I had always been treated like meat by men, and now my husband, the man I trusted and loved, was acting in the same way. He desired to present me to two men I had never met, solely for his personal satisfaction. Like all the others, he didn't care about my wishes or feelings. All he wanted was to use my body for his own pleasure. It seemed like the gravest betrayal of all. Anyway, I drove directly to my parents' house, made up an excuse, and left without looking back. I made the decision to move out of town after my divorce to avoid the possibility of running into him again. I got here in this manner. Marge extended her arm to grasp my hand. "My apologies, Jess. You must have felt horrified by that." "You know what, that wasn't even the worst thing about it," I continued. As he was explaining to me what those men planned to do to me that night, I looked around the room and saw boxes containing video cameras and lighting equipment. That man intended to record the entire event on tape. If I had followed his wishes, I most likely would have ended up on some shady website. Marge's expression turned pale. "That's just unbelievable." I could not seem to stop crying now. I find it most frustrating to wonder what went wrong. How could I have made him feel that way about me? What other actions could I have taken to keep my marriage intact? I simply feel like such a letdown. She gave my hand a light squeeze. "You are not to blame, Jess. Nothing you did could have prevented that, and nothing you did could have contributed to it. It wasn't your problem, it was your ex's." "Maybe," I replied, "but I can't help but feel that way. You can understand, though, why I'm not particularly interested in men at the moment." I was sitting there wiping my face when I noticed a man walking toward our table and holding two drinks in his hands. But he turned around abruptly and walked back toward the bar as soon as he saw the tears streaming down my cheeks. Marge laughed a little, so she must have seen him too. "Well, at least one good thing has come out of this. It looks like you found an effective way to ward off unwanted advances." Even though I was crying, I had to smile at that. Marge guarded me from the moment we left the tavern until we got to my car. After that, she hugged me tightly and said, "Jess, hang in there. Things will improve." Hopefully, she was correct. As Expo drew nearer, the following few weeks at work that spring were extremely hectic. This was a crucial occasion. At the show, the company planned to introduce its new line of components, and it was hoping to secure significant orders. An unsuccessful show could have dire repercussions. A successful one would set the tone for the entire year. The rumor that was going around the office that my boss, Mr. Moffat, was going to announce his retirement added to the chaos. I was apprehensive. I had not seen or heard anything from him to suggest that. The second part of the rumor stated that Mr. Moffat's vice presidential successor would be chosen from Peter or Scott. That caused a stir and split the office up into 3 factions. Some in the Scott supporters wanted to benefit from his advancement. Naturally, the second group was made up of people who supported Peter and believed they should choose their leader. The third was the anyone but Scott faction, which was composed of people who were horrified by Scott's conceit and worried about what life would be like under his leadership. Chaos ensued, with many people losing their cool under pressure to meet deadlines. Amidst all of this confusion, early one afternoon, Mr. Moffat summoned me to his office with a pressing request. After reviewing some pricing information that Scott had provided, Mr. Moffat requested to see Scott's feedback. However, I discovered that Scott was working from home when I called his cell phone. He recommended that I bring him the materials. As much as I disliked being the messenger, I was suspicious of Scott's request for me to visit his house. However, I had to get back to Mr. Moffat quickly, so I pulled my car out of the garage and pointed my GPS to Scott's house. Scott lived in the kind of neighborhood I would have expected of a rising star executive, at the end of a cul-de-sac. After parking outside, I carried the material packet to his front porch. However, no one answered the doorbell when I rang it. I tried to look in the windows to see if anyone was home after being surprised by that. After that, I looked around the house's side, but no one was there. In an attempt to contact him, I took out my cell phone, but before I could speak, I thought I heard voices in the back. After some hesitation, I eventually turned and headed toward the back of the house. It didn't take long to figure out that the voices were coming from the back of the house's screened-in porch. My steps slowed as I approached because there seemed strange about what I was hearing. I cautiously peered around the corner before recoiling in embarrassment. The noises I had heard were of Scott having sex with a woman. I stood there, uncertain and paralyzed. I could barely stand there in the conditions, but I had to get the material to Scott so he could review it. I hesitated for a moment, and then I heard the woman, and I must confess that my lustful curiosity took over. I had not experienced anything physical in such a long time that my senses were completely overwhelmed by the sights and sounds of this unexpected encounter. The sounds the woman was making made it obvious that she was enjoying Scott's attention. Peeping in again, I saw her lying on a chaise lounge. Scott knelt beside her. When I noticed that I was still holding my cell phone in my hand, I held it up and started recording the sensual scene that was unfolding in front of me without really giving it any thought. The woman apparently ran to impale herself on Scott after realizing she could not wait any longer. Have you ever experienced anything better? No, Scott. Better than your husband. He made fun of. Am I better than Peter? I thought it might be a coincidence, but a chill went through me. Oh, my God, Scott, the woman cried in a passionate reply. He can't even come close. I've never felt the way you do about him. Don't you feel guilty screwing me while he's slaving away? When Scott made fun of her, I was sick to my stomach. Her words, "I love it," came out. It makes me feel so wicked being here, knowing he hasn't got a clue. Scott continued, bragging, and when I get promoted to VP, I'm going to screw him over just the way I screwed his wife. He then intensified his attack, causing the woman's words to dissolve into moans, which eventually turned into screams. I rushed back to the front of the house because I thought Scott's neighbors might hear her and think I was playing Peeping Tom because she was making so much noise. I dashed to my car after hastily hiding the papers behind Scott's screen door. My hands were shaking from the shock I was feeling as I drove away. Oh, God, what am I going to do? I asked myself again and again. Peter cannot know. Finding out that Callie is unfaithful to him would be fatal for him, and with none other than Scott. However, I have to tell him. I can't hide something from him like this. Upon returning to the office, I quickly headed to my desk and tried to occupy myself. But all I could think of was poor Peter being made fun of by Scott and his wife as they argued. The recollection made me queasy. He's not only attractive but also a good guy. How come she would deceive him? As the afternoon went on, I eventually lost patience with it. I finally made the call I had been dreading when I picked up the phone. Peter, Jess is here. Will you be spending some time in the office? He chuckled. Oh, yeah, I'm probably going to be working late every night till Expo. Can I come by and see you for a little while around 5:30? I inquired. He said with a smile, sure, come on by whenever you'd like. I winced because I knew that after I spoke with him, he wouldn't be overly happy. It felt like entering a hospital for surgery when you were walking to Peter's office. You knew you had to go, but every nerve in your body was telling you to turn around. Peter waved at me when I arrived, but he sat up in his chair with a worried expression on his face when he saw my expression. What is it, Jess? What's happened? I slumped into a desk chair at his desk. Peter, I must break some bad news. I really don't want to be the one to give this to someone else, but I'm at a loss. He said, it's okay, you can tell me. I was unable to look him in the eye. Mr. Moffat asked me to deliver some paperwork to Scott's house this afternoon. I heard some noise outside his house when I arrived because no one was answering the doorbell. I noticed this when I peered out onto his screened-in porch. After that, I gave Peter my cell phone and turned it on to play back the video I had taken. He laughed sharply at the sight of Scott hunched over the woman laying on the chaise lounge. He mockingly remarked, so that's what Scott calls working from home. I can't say I'm surprised. I pushed my phone back to him when he started to hand it to me again. I said, keep watching, in a sickly low voice. Because Peter looked like he had been smacked on the face, I could tell if the brunette sat up and started giving Scott the finger. It was inevitable, I started crying. Seeing a man's illusions crumble before your very eyes is a terrible sight. His face simultaneously showed shock, pain, and rage. I quickly reached over to try to take my phone out of his hands as he sat there in agony, not wanting him to hear what I knew was going to happen next. However, he refused to give up the phone. His voice was strained as he asked, there's more, isn't there? I said, you don't want to watch it, Peter, but I knew he wouldn't be deterred. Then we heard Scott's and Peter's wife gasping. Peter's face paled when she started talking about how good Scott was and how much she enjoyed pulling pranks on her husband. I prayed in private that I would never witness humiliation of that kind toward anyone. At last, the video cut off, and Peter sagged down in his seat. He raised his head and gave me a haggard look after a few moments. What truly struck me the most, it was more than just Callie's infidelity. That's already quite awful. However, the way she caressed, kissed, and held him. They were making love, not merely sharing a bed. I was at a loss for words to say that would lessen his suffering, but I couldn't think of anything. I just kept saying to myself, I'm so sorry, Peter, I'm so sorry. Something that had been bothering me all afternoon suddenly became clear to me as he hung his head in despair, and I blurted out, louder than I meant to, I just realized something. Peter, Scott and Kelly must have wanted me to see them together. Specifically, he asked me to deliver those papers to Mr. Moffat. He wanted me to see them together and hear them. He wanted to make me tell you and make me look bad. Sob, declared Peter. He's always hated me and this is his way of getting back at me. But why? I inquired. I can understand that the two of you are rivals, but why would he be so vindictive? Peter exhaled. Scott used to report to me back before you started working here. He was intelligent, but a little impetuous, in my opinion. Once, when he got really defensive about an expense account he'd turned in, I even saved his job. When Audit posed a standard question about it, Scott lost control. In a mocking memo, he effectively told the head of Audit, go to hell, how dare you question me? I was able to halt the memo before it was given to the vice president of auditing because Scott copied me on it. After I managed to calm Scott down and persuade him to remove the memo, the issue completely vanished from my perspective. Later on, the position of sales director became available, and I suggested Scott for it. I shook my head, not understanding. Wait a second, do you mean to suggest that Scott despises you for recommending him for a promotion? I had assumed he would be eternally appreciative. Peter gave a headshake. That would be true in both your and my worlds. However, Scott believes that he is superior to everyone else in his world and detests the notion that he owes anyone anything. You could say that he has never accepted my forgiveness for putting him in debt. It was my time to give a headshake now. However, I'm still baffled as to why he would expose his affair at such risk. That would put him in trouble here, wouldn't it? Peter sounded icy and acrimonious. Not really. The business wouldn't want to get involved because they would consider it to be a private matter between Callie and Scott. No, I believe Scott wanted me to find out in order to incite me to take a stupid action that will result in my termination. Even if I don't, he's probably counting on me being so embarrassed at work that I'll be unable to focus on my work while I'm entangled in a contentious divorce. My comment, I will upload part 2 ending today as well. We will see what trouble beauty brings in there. Have you gotten in any trouble because of your beauty? Comment down below, sub and bell, and I will catch you there.